Now, Minister for Foreign Affairs Simon Coveney will today hold a private meeting in Luxembourg with EU Chief Negotiator Michel Barnier to discuss the current state of play in Brexit negotiations and in particular talks on the draft protocol on Ireland and Northern Ireland. Joining me now to discuss this further is MEP and Vice President of the European Parliament, Mairead McGuinness. Thank you very much for taking our call, Mairead. We're reading here that Theresa May says that actually the EU and the UK are quite close, they're not that far apart. We're also reading that Donald Tusk says that they're closer to a hard Brexit, a crash-out Brexit. So which is it?
Well, I think you could say it's a mixture of both, because what's really important is that the talks are ongoing, even though there's been a bit of an impasse. And if you were being clinical, you would wonder, is there any possibility to bridge that gap that exists currently? But both sides are, really working hard to try and find a solution. I suppose every so often, when we hit these bumps on the road, you're inclined to pessimism, but that's not just an option for us, because the people that I represent in Midlands North West along the border region, but the country generally knows that a bad or no deal is the worst of all possible outcomes. I think that the dilemma for the British Prime Minister are twofold. One, that she drew very severe red lines of leaving the customs union and single market very early on. And secondly, she relying on the Democratic Unionist Party to keep her in power. And she has made commitments to Northern Ireland, which they are, in my view, misreading, in a sense. What she has said and what we have all we want to see is the situation continuing post-Brexit as it is today on the island of Ireland. And that's because of the Good Friday Agreement and because it works. And people are happy today than they were 20 years ago.
Yeah, Mairead, effectively, Theresa May has proposed a time-limited UK-wide customs union arrangement. Now, the EU want to keep the UK in the union. This keeps them in there for another couple of years. So, really, who needs to give
Mark,
here?
I think you're misreading that, because the EU didn't want the UK to leave, but we fully respect that they are, because the people have voted. So I don't think this is in any way can be made. I mean, I think that's misreading it completely. What is very clear, though, is that there is an inability or an unwillingness from the United Kingdom, perhaps, to look at the withdrawal agreement text. It's written. They don't agree with it, but they've never actually come forward with amendments to it. Instead, they're writing something completely different as part of the future relationship. So I think the dilemma lies that it's just a misreading of the situation. And, because of the difficult politics in the United Kingdom, Theresa May is also under pressure internally in the Conservative Party, with not many, but a number of her colleagues not so loyal. So, I mean, she, and I understand her political dilemma, what I've constantly asked British colleagues to do is please work with what's on the table and change it, because we're not wedded to the words that are in this draft withdrawal agreement on Ireland, but we are wedded to the principle behind it. Okay. And, I think what we all need to do is hold our nerve and maybe not just read all the headlines, but trust that a huge amount of work is being done to solve this conundrum. And maybe it will work and maybe it won't, but politics, I hope, will prevail.
OK, Mairead McGuinness, thank you for that.
Well, joining us with that story and everything else this morning is Ellen Gunning, Director of the Irish Academy of Public Relations. Mairead McGuinness there saying, look, this is negotiations, these are bumps on the road, was the phrase that she used, but there does seem to be an impasse here and there does seem to be deadlock, and it's very difficult, given the DUP's position, to see where the wiggle room is.
There's very little wiggle room left and there's very little time left to wriggle. I noticed that Theresa May is actually addressing her own cabinet today, and she's speaking with the EU leaders before dinner on Wednesday. You've got to give her credit for trying to stay in the game and for trying to move the goalposts as much as she can and avoid as many speed bumps as possible.
But is she trying to back away from what has been agreed in December and March about the backstop and about the lack of a border in Northern Ireland?
I think she very definitely is. I think if you look at the language that was used yesterday by Simon Coveney and Leo Varadkar, Simon Coveney actually said that he was frustrated and disappointed, and he actually said that he thought Theresa May should stick to the deal as done, which I thought was the clearest indication we've got so far.
He said, we have it in writing.
Yeah. Is that it's like there is no wriggling out of this. This is the deal. Stick with it. And Leo Varadkar
at this late
said,
stage.
At this late stage. And Leo Varadkar said it would be bad for Ireland. I can't remember exactly, but like, not so bad for the EU, they'd survive it, but a disaster for Britain. So I think what they're both saying is concentrate on the deal as done. It's in writing. Find another way around it.
We have this, we have a new phrase now, which has become very popular at the moment, time limit, time limited. I'm sure it's probably self-explanatory, but when they say time limited, what do they mean? And when we say not time limited, what do we mean?
When they say time limited, I think what Theresa May is saying is that if she agrees to this, if there is a no deal, if the backstop comes into play, the backstop basically guarantees that Ireland as an island will be treated as part of the EU. There will be no physical border. There has to be a way of dealing with it, which is off the island of Ireland, which is a non-physical border.
Which really means that Northern Ireland would stay within the customs union.
Yeah, and what Theresa May is saying is this can't run forever. So if we disappear, that's her time limit. We say there is no time limit to it. There will not be a border again. It doesn't matter what deal is done, you need to do a deal that remains a borderless Ireland. What she's saying is, but that can only run for so long, and then we need to renegotiate. And what the Irish government is saying is, we have it in writing.
Is there any chance, do you think, that Theresa May might be able to rely on, let's say, some members of the Labour Party, like Caroline Flint yesterday in the Labour Party, come out and said, I will support a deal because that is best for Britain, and that she may be able to rely on Labour support and maybe not be as reliant on DUP support?
It's an interesting one because Arlene Foster was down yesterday and she was talking to both Micheal Martin and the Taoiseach. And by all accounts, the body language was that she wasn't budging an inch and the Taoiseach wasn't budging an inch either. I don't know about Micheal Martin. I doubt that he was budging either. Her problem is that she's got 10 DUP. The DUP really is the tail that's wagging the dog at the moment. They're the people who are saying this is acceptable, this is not acceptable for Northern Ireland. And Theresa May can't actually be prime ministerial and say, well, the view for the entire of the UK is X, and therefore Northern Ireland fits into it as this part, because she needs them. She needs them to keep her government in play. I don't know that enough Labour people would support her, and if they do, then at what cost? So she's really caught. She needs somebody's support, and that's going to come at a price.
At the end of the day, I suppose the DUP party and Arlene Foster, she is in a slightly tricky position because she is there to protect unionism, isn't she? Which is protecting Northern Ireland and the UK.
She is also, as First Minister, there to represent her constituency, more than half of whom voted to remain.
I was going to say her constituency definitely was Remain constituency.
But she has got the DUP, the truth of the DUP in her hands, really, doesn't she? Which is protect the union at all cost.
She was actually negotiating yesterday as leader of the DUP and not as First Minister.
Well,
and she's made that clear.
Right, let's move on to, speaking of negotiating, confidence and supply. Two leaders met yesterday afternoon for a formal meeting and they agreed that they would do that, and they're now going to appoint their negotiating teams. It would seem as if it looks like there's kind of an agreement on maybe one more year, or is it one more budget? All things being equal, that they should get another year.
This is fascinating because Micheal Martin came out originally and said, or in the last while, and said, look, obviously Brexit needs to be organised, therefore we will not pull the plug until Brexit. So he has said you have until March, effectively, to agree the next deal. Now, Leo Varadkar was saying, look, this is a dust it over, it's the same deal, roll it over, have a look at it, blessing on all your houses, move on. Micheal Martin is saying, no, this is a complete renegotiation. I think he's very clever. I think he's controlling, effectively, the date of the next general election. He has the Taoiseach where he wants him. It's like, I won't do anything till March, the Taoiseach won't either. But it depends on how he plays the negotiation.
Well, Leo wants 2 years, and Micheal will give him 1.
Probably. He definitely doesn't want to give him a full term. But I think
and there's no way he's just trying to push it out until the new year?
I think he's pushing it. I think he has a date in mind. I think Micheal Martin knows when he wants to collapse the government, and it won't be pre-March.
And it won't be pre-March.
But it won't be Leo Varadkar's call. I think that's the grand plan. They will agree a deal, but really Micheal Martin will control.
So Leo's been running the table for the last 2 years, but that's changed now.
I think so. I think this is the game changer.
Right.
Thank you, Ellen. We'll leave it there for this morning. Now, plenty more to come on Ireland M. Back after this short break.